Hi, everyone. Welcome to our April Staff Picks show. And you'll never guess what the theme is this month. Do you want to tell them what your part of the theme is, Joy?
Oh, yes. You know how I love reading true crime? Well, I've sort of moved away from serial killers and I have embraced the concept of the con artist. And I'm not the only one. If you watch TV or read, you'll just see how popular con artists have been lately. And so I chose to focus on them this month because it is April Fool's Month.
Yes, it is. And it's also Poetry Month. It's the 25th year of National Poetry Month. So we have quite an interesting show for you today. A lot of the things we have today you can get online with the Libby or Overdrive app for free. We're also doing physical pickup of items. If you see an item in print or prefer it that way, you can call ahead or request it online and pick it up when it is ready for you. So now I'm going to switch screens so you can see the fun books we have lined up for you this month. All right, poets and con artists. This is going to be fun. Let's go. So all of the poetry books I'm talking about today were well reviewed for 2020. They're considered some of the best poetry coming out of last year. So my first one is Homie by Dana Smith. This one came out in January of 2020. Smith's work has been featured on BuzzFeed, The New York Times, PBS NewsHour, and on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. They have also been featured on Forbes' list of 30 under 30. Smith is considered one of the best poets of their generation. The book Homie was a finalist for the 2020 National Books Critics Circle Award for Poetry and a finalist for the 2021 NAACP Image Award for Poetry. This collection has been called humorous, irreverent, and like a flower growing through concrete. This book is Smith's anthem about the saving grace of friendship. Rooted in the loss of one of Smith's close friends, this book comes from the search for joy and intimacy within a nation where both can seem scarce. In poems of power and generosity, Smith acknowledges that in a country overrun by violence, xenophobia, and disparity, and in a body defined by race, queerness, and diagnosis, it can be hard to survive and to remember reasons for living. But then the phone lights up, there's a shout outside the window, and family, both blood and chosen, arrives with the perfect food and redemption. Part friendship diary, part bright elegy, part war cry, Homie was written for Danez and Danez's friends, and for you and yours. This book got starred reviews from Publishers Weekly and Booklist. Shelf Awareness said, Smith writes with power and precision, and their poetic forms are as diverse as their topics. Their personal style mixes modern slang with gorgeous imagery, resulting in verse as colorful and fanciful as Pablo Neruda, but also savvy, down-to-earth, and heartfelt. I really like that description that it's got slang, but also gorgeous imagery. So I think this sounds like a great collection. And I think in this past year, we've really come to appreciate our friends, even if we've only been really seeing them on Zoom.
Absolutely.
And here's one from Joy.
My first choice for this month is Veritas, a Harvard professor, a con man, and the Gospel of Jesus's Wife by Ariel Sabar, which was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, a Smithsonian Best Book of the Year, and my favorite, an Edgar Award nominee for Best True Crime. In 2003, a little-known writer named Dan Brown published a thriller which centered around a millennia-old plot to conceal evidence that Jesus had been married to his devoted follower, Mary Magdalene. The Da Vinci Code rocketed to the top of the bestseller lists and stayed there for a very long time. Brown's ingenious mixture of fact and fiction begged the question, is it true? Was Jesus married? The question is not just one of idle speculation. If Brown's premise could be proven, it would shake the foundation of Catholic belief in priestly celibacy, the role of women in the church, and sexuality in general. Alas, scholars agreed, Dan Brown notwithstanding, there was absolutely no credible evidence either way. That is until Dr. Karen King, renowned professor of church history at the Harvard Divinity School, proclaimed the discovery of a tiny, tattered scrap of papyrus in which Jesus refers to Mary Magdalene as my wife. The heated controversy that ensued set award-winning journalist Ariel Sabar off on a quest to discover the truth, and what follows is a detective story every bit as riveting as the Da Vinci Code itself. Where did that tiny piece of papyrus come from? Could it possibly be real? Linguists, and get this, papyrologists pored over the manuscript in an attempt to answer that question, but could not reach consensus. Ultimately, Sabar's search led him to rural Florida, where he discovered, quote, an internet pornographer with a fascination with the pharaohs, a tortured relationship with the Catholic Church, and a talent for forging documents. But Veritas is a lot more than a story about forgery and deceit. Sabar delves deeply into the question of how we go about distinguishing truth from fiction. There are more than a few troubling indications that King, perhaps out of a sincere desire to prove that the early church had once championed female leadership, ignored protocols designed to authenticate historical documents, rushed the manuscript into publication in the popular media, assigned peer review to friends and family, failed to establish provenance, and ironically ignored a host of dissenting opinions. In the end, the Gospel of Jesus' wife was proven to be a forgery, but the forger, a German national named Walter Fritz, was never charged with a crime. After all, he says, he made no money on the deal, and he never once claimed that the manuscript was real. He waited for the scholars to do that. You gotta admire the guy. So we're back to square one as far as the marital status of Jesus is concerned. However, as we know, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And who knows what the future and the past will bring forth.
Wow, Joy, you've been telling me a little bit about this book, but it's even more wild than I thought it was.
It's pretty fascinating, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. All right, here's my next poetry choice. This one is Ledger by Jane Hirschfield. This one came out in March of 2020. Hirschfield is an internationally renowned poet. She's a Buddhist who studied at California's Zen Center and is an accomplished translator of Japanese poetry. This is her 9th collection, and it does show some Japanese influence. This book has reviewers saying, if you think you don't like poetry, try this. Read the book front to back, then at random, and then front to back again. Very few of the poems in this book are longer than a page, and most are written with short lines, making it very accessible. This book, Ledger, the pages are considered to hold Hirschfield's most important work. The opening lines of "Let them not say" are already much quoted, and those lines are, "Let them not say, we did not see it, we saw." And this poem is regarded as one for an age of alternative facts. Hirschfield's poems give us a list, both personal and communal, of our present-day predicaments. They call on us to sustain one another and the earth while pondering the crises of refugees, justice, and climate. They consider the minimum mass for a whale, for a language, an ice cap, and recognize the intimacy of connection and the debt we owe to this world's continuing beauty. There is a constant focus upon what is said and unsaid, what can be rationalized and what cannot. Hirschfield says, "Ledger was written in grief, and into my bewilderment at our human inaction, it was written in contemplation of the implausibility of our still standing upright." This book got starred reviews from Booklist and Publishers Weekly. Vox said, "Hirschfield writes about what matters. She is responsible with every word choice, every line a deliberate beat, each poem its own chrysalis of meaning. She gives you the observation of life as we're all living it, and the personal tragedy life entails, and then slips in themes of planetary crisis. It's the kind of gut punch good poems provide, the solid fist inside the velvet glove." So I put a little snippet of the title poem there, Ledger, and that just gives you an idea of some of the things in this book where she's really like weighing and counting and comparing sizes and measurements of different things that you wouldn't expect, but making it, very beautiful in the process. Here's Joy's next one.
Do you think that 1 liter of Polish vodka really contains 12 pounds of potatoes? It must, huh?
I bet it does.
Or
Yeah,
she
why
wouldn't
not?
have said it. Yeah. Okay. All right, I digress. All right. My next choice for this week, or actually this month, is The King of Confidence: Utopian Dreamers, Frontier Schemers, True Believers, False Prophets, and the Murder of an American Monarch by journalist Miles Harvey, which was a PW Best Book of the Year 2020. Well, interested yet? With a title like that, of course you are. When Charles Dickens toured the United States in the mid-19th century, he observed that we Americans love a good swindle. Con artists may be corrupt, yes, heartless, yes, but oh boy, are they smart. And perhaps not all that far removed from your average, astute, and admired entrepreneur. It could be argued that 19th century America was tailor-made for a good con artist, with all that land that we stole from the Native Americans ready and waiting to be exploited. Wide open land into which a good thief or swindler could make a bundle and then vanish if the law got a bit too close for comfort. So we had the potential for riches, R1, and for reinvention, R2, and then we had a third R, religion. Most 19th century Americans were religious, but many had soured on mainstream options and gravitated toward new prophets and fresh alternatives. Enter James Jesse Strang. Even as a boy, Strang knew he was destined for greatness. In his diary, he claimed that he would one day marry Princess Victoria, the one who eventually became Queen of England. Well, that didn't work out, and neither did any of the other schemes he cooked up in his youth. So he did what any ambitious young American man would do. He faked his own death and got the hell out of upstate New York. And when next we find him, he is in Nauvoo, Illinois, claiming to be the anointed successor to the martyred Mormon prophet Joseph Smith. "If you follow me," Strang told the demoralized people of Nauvoo, "you don't have to follow Brigham on a scary journey west. You can stay right here in the Midwest with me." Well, as we know, most Mormons did accompany Brigham Young into the state of Utah. But Strang did attract his share of true believers, as well as a smattering of gypsies, tramps, and thieves, who joined him in his pirate colony on Beaver Island in Lake Michigan. There, he established himself as undisputed prophet and king. So if you can't marry a queen, become king. Some of Strang's followers were more interesting than their esteemed leader. Among them, George Adams, who alternated missionary work for Strang with playing Shakespeare's Richard III on various frontier stages. And Strang's nephew, in quotes, Charles Douglas, who traveled with him as his private secretary until he was unmasked as Elvira Field, a woman who became the second of his 4 wives. Eventually, Strang ran afoul of his neighbors and the powers that be. And that is where murder comes in. Author Miles Harvey sums it all up by saying, Strang was, quote, a swindler, idealist, imposter, saint, thief, genius, and clown, a true American original. And he cautions that when the time is right, figures like Strang reappear, wearing a new guise and exploiting new fears and offering new dreams of salvation. Nathaniel Philbrick called this book a masterpiece. Kirkus said that it's perfect for fans of The Devil in the White City, and author David Eggers calls it ludicrously enjoyable.
And now I would like to go to a pirate colony.
Hey, me too. Next time I'm in the Midwest, on to
Sounds
Beaver
good.
Island.
All right, and here's my next one. All right, this is Obit by Victoria Chang. This one came out in April of 2020. For that year, it was a New York Times notable book, a Time Magazine must-read book, and a best book of the year, according to NPR. It's Chang's 5th collection of poetry, and it won the Frank Sanchez Book Award. After her mother died, Victoria refused to write elegies. Instead, she distilled her grief during a feverish 2 weeks by writing poetic obituaries for all she lost in the world, mourning and commemorating the death of a variety of ideas, objects, emotions, and people. In Obit, Chang writes of the way memory gets up after someone has died and starts walking. The poems reinvent the form of newspaper obituaries to both name what has died, civility, language, the future, mother's blue dress, and the cultural impact of that death on the living. Elegies attempt to immortalize the dead, but obituaries express loss. And throughout the book, Chang uses the journalistic style of the obituary and its long, thin, columnar structure. Many think the last poem in this collection is the most powerful. It's an obit dated February 14th, 2018, which is the date of the shootings at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. The poem begins, America, died on February 14th, 2018, and my dead mother doesn't know. Since her death, America has died a series of small deaths, each one less precise than the next. Reviewers say that one of the accomplishments of this book is how Chang makes private mourning and public mourning part of the same process. This book got a starred review from Publishers Weekly. The Los Angeles Review of Books said, "Here we have unmitigated heartbreak, but heartbreak mercifully free of the usual death etiquette, platitudes of afterlives or better-offs. Thus, Victoria Chang has created something powerful and unconventional. These poems are zinger curveballs and often come from the graveyard's left field." So obviously this book deals with death and some sad themes, but I think the way that she addressed it and I think it's fascinating. She wrote everything in an obit newspaper style. So I think this is a really interesting collection. I'm going to be picking this one up soon. And here's another from Joy.
I think I will too. And now from the sublime to the ridiculous. Confident women, swindlers, grifters, and shapeshifters of the feminine persuasion by Tori Telfler, author of Lady Killers, Deadly Women Throughout History. Do you detect a theme? So Here we are, a few weeks out from Women's History Month, when all good moms and dads tell their daughters they can be anything they want to be. Maybe an astrophysicist or a journalist or maybe even president. But how about a really talented con artist? Yes, Tori Telfler's Confident Women reminds us that not every famous woman deserves a postage stamp of her own. Some deserve a good long prison sentence. And yes, girls and boys, women can be just as skilled at criminal enterprise as their counterparts of the male persuasion. Now, ordinarily, I am not all that fond of compilations that treat individual lives and crimes in 20 pages or less. I often find them too shallow to do justice to their subjects, and many are not particularly well written at that. So I was a bit surprised to find myself devouring this book. For one thing, Telfler has chosen a diverse cast of characters, from the scheming con woman who played a role, however minor, in bringing on the French Revolution, to a 19-year-old African-American single mother who adopted a perfect Nigerian accent and hoodwinked the NFL. There is Fu Tam, a fortune teller of dubious ethnicity, who hobnobbed with the literati of the Harlem Renaissance in the 1930s and made a fortune. And Wang Ti, 21st century scammer who targeted fabulously wealthy Chinese Olympians who, let's face it, have too much money anyway. As is the case with their swindling brothers, the factors that motivate these women are not as clear as might be expected. Money, of course, but for some it may be fame or just getting close to the famous. Take Bonnie Lee Blakely, small-town grifter, desperate for a measure of notoriety, who married actor Robert Blake and was later murdered. And for those for whom fraud is a true calling, there's the thrill of just getting away with it. Telfler's style tends toward the light and breezy, and if there is humor to be found in these often ludicrous situations, she will find it. But there is no such thing as a victimless crime, and we can't forget spiritualist Anna Disdebar, who lured naive young women to her home and took a page from the Jeffrey Epstein playbook, or Rose Marks, fortune teller who over decades gutted the life of a well-known romance novelist. And finally, there is Shanti Kimes, who crossed the line from con artist to serial killer. Yes, some of these stories are grim, but Telfler's breezy style makes Confident Women something of a beach read. So this summer, go to Hampton Beach and dive in. But remember, if someone comes up and offers you a deal that seems too good to be true, trust me, it is.
I just want to clarify that is not me in the top row, one over from the left. Definitely not
Good
me.
to know. I was a little worried for a minute.
All right, that brings us to the end of our episode for this week. Don't forget to give us some likes and loves if you've enjoyed our videos, and share this with all your friends who are always looking for book reviews. Otherwise, thanks for watching.
See you later, fellow readers.